Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to More Conversations. Our show is about artificial intelligence, the ability of computers to imitate intelligent human behavior, that is, to think for themselves. Artificial intelligence, easily the most important advance in computer science in a generation, has become the digital topic du jour as it appears that China is stealing the march on us. Will AI be a force for good or evil in the world? Will it benefit humanity or empower authoritarian regimes like China to ferret out dissidents and silence them? With us is Nick Thompson, editor-in-chief of Wired, an authority on the political and national security implications of artificial intelligence. Along with Ian Bremmer, Nick has written a compelling piece for Wired with the sobering title, "The Artificial Intelligence Cold War with China That Threatens Us All." I'm pleased to welcome Nick back to this table.
Thanks, it's great to be back here, Jim.
Now, Nick, just so our viewers will understand what artificial intelligence is, and so I'll understand as well, could you please explain what it's all about?
Well, you gave a very good definition in the introduction, which is the ability of computers to think for themselves. It's mimicked on the idea that we'll train computers to think like humans. So instead of just saying, execute this command and do this, it's here's a bunch of data, look at the data and figure out how to act on it yourself. And increasingly, artificial intelligence is just the way all computers work. So the definition of what it is blurring a little bit. Most machines are, certainly in the future, certainly in the near future, will have AI built into it somewhere in the stack of systems running whatever you're running.
So would an application be that doesn't exist yet, but I'm driving home, I want to be sure dinner is cooked, so I say to the robot, make dinner. Is that what artificial intelligence does?
Well, it could be. I mean, that could be just sort of standard computing where you're sending a signal over your phone line to your stove to cook a pre-cooked meal. But if you're saying, make me something I want, and what the machine is doing is it's looking at everything you've eaten, everything that's in the kitchen. It's looked at your blood data from the day, and it's decided that you need some more broccoli. That's artificial intelligence, where it's looking at the data and it's making choices much like the way a human would.
So how advanced is the technology? Is it possible the robot will put the cat in the oven?
No, well, that specific example is really interesting because one of the things that robots are particularly bad at is dexterity, right? And one of the things that cats are particularly good at is dexterity. So actually the hardest thing to happen would be for the robot to put the cat in the oven, because the robot could never catch the cat and the cat could get away. But to the broader question of whether there could be negative consequences, yes, absolutely.
So you could have a driverless car that is really designed that there could be no accidents at all, but there may be a glitch and the car might run over somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting and complicated example. So with artificial intelligence in cars, you will have cars that can understand what's happening on the road much better than humans can, right? They have many more cameras than we have eyes. They have capacities to process information faster than we do. So that's good. They can communicate with each other. So ideally they can go 80 miles an hour, 2 feet apart. That would be good for traffic congestion. So all of those things are good. But you also could have a glitch, right? The system could fail. The system could be hacked. And then the really complicated thing is there are lots of decisions that we humans make as we drive that are morally complicated decisions, right? Like you have to, do I swerve and put my car at risk to not hit a squirrel? Do I swerve and put my car at risk to not hit a single person walking with a shopping cart? Do I swerve and put myself at risk to not hit a family, right? And somehow you're going to have to program that level of moral decision into a car. Or do I swerve off a bridge in order to avoid running something over? And that will have to be built into the systems of the car. So we're opening a whole Pandora's box of moral reasoning as we go forward with this technology.
So will it be necessary to marry natural intelligence with artificial intelligence so that I tell the computer, I'd prefer to die than run over a family?
Yeah, so there are a couple interesting things there. One is the way we train AI systems. There's a certain group of people who believe you just give them data and train on that. There's another group of people that says you give them data plus common sense and train them on that. And then to your specific example, yeah, it's interesting to know. It's interesting to wonder whether in the future car manufacturer will sort of program in general values, will program in scenarios, and whether you'll actually get a bunch of options, right? Like I would like my car to be the most moral car on the road, and I'm willing to sacrifice myself to save the squirrel, right? Or I'd like to run over the squirrel. And you could have different settings, or different states could have settings, right? So when you go drive from Massachusetts to Texas, you go from avoid the squirrel to run over the squirrel, or run over the squirrel to avoid the squirrel. You have very different values built into your car.
So will there have to be warnings? Warning, Mr. Thompson. Your car has been programmed not to run over the squirrel, and you may die as a result.
It's possible, or...
Otherwise, you sue the manufacturer for bad AI.
I mean, what will probably happen is the decision whether to run over the squirrel or not will be baked into the system, and the users will not be told about it, and we'll try not to think about it too much because it will be so complicated. But what will be interesting is that some engineer at some company writing the code will have made that decision for you.
Well, let's go to the dark side of AI. Does it have, or will it have, military applications? Maybe it does already.
Well, that could be the bright side, too. I mean, so our AI has applications everywhere, right? Everything is going to be changed, not everything. Most things will be changed in some way by AI. Military operations, absolutely, right? So we do aircraft maintenance by looking at AI, right? Study the data on how long this airplane has been in commission and the parts, and let's figure out before it starts to break down how to fix it. So that exists. We will certainly have drones that use AI, right? You perhaps have predator drones. There's been a big debate about whether technology for image recognition, which is something AI is really good at, should be built into predator drones. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? It makes them more accurate, so they're less likely to blow up wedding parties. But it also makes it so if they're more accurate, you're more likely to use them, and there's less of a deterrent to using them.
Or they may kill the groom, but everybody else will be spared because...
And is that better or is that worse, right? So that's a really complicated debate. And then there are applications like missile defense, where surely you want maximum image recognition. It'd be hard to argue against that. And then there's war planning, right? So AI systems first were good at chess, then they're good at Go. Eventually they'll be good at planning offensive military operations, and the country that has better AI will have a more effective military. So then, is that a dark application or is that a good application? Would you like the smartest person in the country working at the Defense Department, or would you not? And that's a whole another set of moral questions.
Moral questions that are a function of natural intelligence rather than artificial intelligence.
Yeah, but related.
But related. Yeah. Okay. So what about jobs? Are we going to lose jobs because of AI?
Well, yes, we are definitely going to lose jobs, and we'll also create jobs. And so the way I like to think about this question is that every job is at risk to some degree. But the jobs that are most at risk are jobs that involve repetitive tasks and don't involve emotional connections to people. So, an accountant is probably a lot at risk, a typist, some forms of translation. Jobs that involve human connection, right, where it involves an emotional connection between people, are less at risk, and jobs that involve creativity are less at risk. Those are the things that AI has a harder time with. So this is sometimes talked about in the medical field, where a nurse, who really depends, like a lot of a nurse's success rate depends on the emotional connection with the patient, may actually be safer than a radiologist, where a lot of their job depends on analyzing images, right? And there's certain things a radiologist does that the radiologist needs to do. So it's not like all the cheap job, or not the low-paying jobs will go first and the high-paying jobs later. It's more there's a spectrum, right? A paralegal, somebody who goes through lots and lots of data looking for patterns. We're not going to need many paralegals in the future.
How about a lawyer? They're getting close to home.
A trial lawyer will absolutely need, because there's a lot more creativity.
Thank you very much.
And the emotional connection to a jury. So paralegals probably doomed, lawyers probably in pretty good shape, certain kinds of lawyers. So I think there will be a lot of change, and there'll be lots of new jobs created. My guess, in the 5-year time span, more jobs will be created than are lost. In the 30-year time span, who the hell knows?
Now, do you see any dangers in AI?
Oh, yeah, immense.
I mean, there's sort of an assumption that AI will spread the gospel, spread ideas all over the world,
Sure.
will be an aid to liberal democracies, and will lead to the downfall of tyrannical autocratic rulers. But do you see that as the case?
Well, no, I don't. I think one of the most interesting things in technology over the last 20 years is that it hasn't led to democracy the way certainly I expected, and I think lots of people expected. Right? At the end of the Cold War, one of the assumptions was that once people have infinite information, it would be much harder to run an authoritarian country. Right? One of the ways that
Supposed to be the end of history.
it's the end of history, exactly. But now we look, and we're 30 years from the end of the Cold War, or from the end of history, and authoritarianism is on the rise. Right? The number of authoritarian countries is up, the number of democracies is down. China has only increased its power, and it certainly hasn't opened up the way that we all thought it was. And so the question is, how much of a role does technology play in that? And it's very hard to parse out, but I think it has played some role, and that technology has actually been a centralizing force, and that the authoritarian states have been able to use technology more to their advantage than citizens have. They've been able to track dissidents, consolidate power, stifle speech in ways that I didn't think were possible, and dissidents have been unable to use it to organize resistance in the way I thought was likely. China is the most powerful example of this. And so then the question comes, with AI, does that relationship flip? Is there some way that AI helps empower democracy, or does AI empower authoritarian governments?
So with human beings still in control of the show, should we evolve a policy and elaborate a policy where we're anti-AI or we're AI averse?
No. So my general sense, okay, so A, if the United States were to come up with a policy that is AI adverse, the United States would just become poorer, more disorganized, with a less effective military and a less effective government, right? And AI mostly will be a tool for strengthening economies, making things work better. Go back to your self-driving cars, right? Self-driving cars are going to have accidents, and there's going to be all kinds of more complexities. Once we have them, the world will manifestly be better, right? Because they don't text, they don't drink and drive, they can be much more efficient in planning your routes, you can have much better traffic control, right? And they'll also be much more comfortable. Because once you have a self-driving car, you don't have to have a steering wheel in the middle of the car, and you don't have to design the same amount for safety, so you can actually make it a much more comfortable sitting environment. So self-driving cars, and I think it's a good metaphor, right? There are lots of risks with AI, but in general, it makes things better. So we should talk about the risks, we should plan for the risks, and we should push the technology forward.
Well, let's talk about China, which you've mentioned.
Yes.
And as you know, the United States has joined with around a dozen nations in condemning China. Breaking news for industrial espionage, technological espionage, stealing intellectual property, and stealing artificial intelligence from other nations. So they're a bad actor here.
They are, certainly their espionage is the work of a bad actor. Certainly theft is the work of a bad actor. On AI, China also has a thriving research community. They have some of the smartest people in the world building AI for Chinese companies, building it in ways that the rest of humanity will benefit from. So there's different sides of the equation. I think what's most important about China is that in the US, our government has had a pretty hands-off approach. Barack Obama started to kind of pay attention to AI his last year in office. Donald Trump is starting to pay now, but it's very limited. In China, it's become one of the central elements of economic planning for the country.
Well, let's go back to 2016, where an American-made machine defeated a Chinese grandmaster at an Asian game called Go. Did that spur China to get into the field of AI with a vengeance? I mean, in 2017, the next year, Xi Jinping at the 19th Party Congress said that the future of China was going to be based on technology and including AI.
Yeah, that is exactly right. I think one of the things that spurred this revolution in China was saying, wait a second, Go, right? I mean, the Americans mastered Go, the perfect Asian art form. The Americans don't even know how to play Go. Most people watching the show have no idea how to play Go, and yet it was an English company that was bought by Google that beat the Chinese world champion and the South Korean world champion. So yes, that was an extremely important moment, and it did help inspire China to make AI such a central part of central planning. And that's one reason why AI development in China is progressing really, really quickly.
So was the lesson of the Go phenomenon that we've got to beat the Asians at their own game?
I think the lesson of the Go phenomenon, I think what the U.S. should care about, less about Go and more about China's national economic policy on AI. If I were in the Trump administration, I would be saying, okay, let's stop worrying about all this other stuff right now. Let's stop worrying about this very short-term stuff. Let's develop a national strategy on AI. Let's figure out how to have as many American businesses as possible working as well as possible on AI. Let's fund basic research through the National Science Foundation, the secret stuff through the Defense Department. Let's put out a lot of grants to academia. Let's figure out the government databases that can be open to the public and to business companies so that there's a more competitive marketplace. You don't want just Facebook and Google, the companies that have the data, the only places to make AI. You want to be able to spread it out as much as possible. Let's come up with a competition policy that pushes this business and this industry forward. And let's scenario plan for a future with a lot more job churn and a lot of the problems that AI is going to cause. That's what I would do if I ran this government, but that's not what this government is doing.
Well, has China stolen the march on us? Do they have the edge? And do you see this as a bad thing?
China, the best thing would be for the U.S. and China to both be growing quickly. I think that China certainly has the edge in national policy. It certainly has some of the edge in business. There are elements of technology where it seems like China has pulled ahead of us. You know, there are areas like face recognition where Chinese technology is advancing really quickly. Why is that? Right? Is it because the state has an interest in surveillance? Is it because there's so many unbanked people and so it's a very important form of identification? Whereas in the US you have an identity card, in China you need to have face recognition. For whatever reason, face recognition technology and AI is really advancing quickly in China. So there are definitely areas where they are ahead and moving more and more ahead. And so
should we be stealing their face recognition technology the way they steal our technology? I mean, doesn't it take a thief to catch a thief?
No. We should be negotiating with them to help create a world where they're incentivized not to do that. I don't think we should be stealing their national secrets, but you do need to have points of leverage and pressure on them to stop the theft. And the most important thing that has to happen is you need to integrate with the Chinese technology sector, right? So what I worry about, the 5-year out scenario that is most unsettling to me is a new Cold War where countries essentially choose between a US technology stack and a Chinese technology stack, where they say, we're going to throw a lot in with China. Huawei is going to build our 5G network. We're going to use Chinese software to build out our surveillance network. And we are going to adopt all of this Chinese technology. And by doing so, in some ways, we'll make our country more like China. And so Venezuela has just done this to a certain degree. Zimbabwe just did this to a certain degree. Pakistan has done this to a certain degree. And it's quite unnerving. You don't want the world, you don't want the world saying, let's make our government more like China, because for all of China's virtues, I don't like authoritarianism. And 2, you don't want a new Cold War. It would be much better if the US technology companies were able to do business in China, and if we were able to trust the Chinese technology companies to do business here without spying on us.
China has a natural advantage over us, doesn't it? Because they have, among other things, state-owned enterprises.
Yes.
So they can tell their state-owned enterprises to develop this area of technology or not, particularly technology they've stolen from American companies that want to do business there.
Yeah, so they have that advantage.
That advantage. I mean, we can't do that. It's morally obnoxious. Also, we're regulated. They don't have to worry about an environmental impact statement or protesters picketing a plant that isn't hiring enough people or doing something that some segment of the populace doesn't like.
Those are all true statements.
So this is a natural disadvantage of democracies.
Well, I'm going to hold off there. I'm going to augment your point, and then I'm going to counter it. So they have another great advantage with AI is that they have low privacy standards, so they can collect more data. right? And data is the lifeblood of
Well,
AI.
Facebook has low privacy standards too.
Facebook has much higher privacy standards than Chinese companies. So yes, you're right. China has the state-owned governments. They don't have as many regulations. They have lower privacy standards.
They also have a broader base of people that can feed them data. And data builds on data. So the more data you have, the bigger the machines, the more AI there is.
That is all true. So we're totally, no. The reason we're not completely doomed in the U.S. to fall infinitely behind is...
I wouldn't have had you on to be a prophet of gloom and doom. Tell us what the answer is.
Well, the point of capitalism is if the state doesn't pick the winners, you get better outcomes, right? That is part of one of the lessons from the Cold War. So the Chinese government says, okay, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, you guys are the winners. We're investing in you. We're in bed with you. In the United States, you can still create a new company, and that should lead to better ideas and more progress. We still have the best higher educational system in the world.
Yeah, we educate Chinese in our colleges and then send them, and they become technologically literate, and then we send them back to
China. And ideally, with better immigration policies, they would stay here and build our companies here. I mean, it is the case that several of the leaders of the biggest companies in the world are immigrants from elsewhere in the world. They want to come here to the U.S. because this is where you can build the best companies and have the best ideas. So if you trust that the things that made the United States the economic powerhouse of the last century and up to today will continue, then you should think that with AI. And it may look frightening that China has all these advantages, but actually, communism, capitalism, which side has traditionally won?
Well, but you argue that the way forward for us is to take China in some kind of technological embrace.
That's a phrase we did use, yeah.
That's the phrase you used. So that means that there'll be an exchange of information. Now, who wins there? The loser embraces the winner, and
I think we both win.
The loser embraces the tiger. Does he wind up inside?
The lion and the tiger make a deal not to eat each other, right? So what we say in the piece, what Ian and I argue in the piece is, look, it's possible that the way to get to the best outcome is to be really tough on China and to say, we're cutting you off, we're going to sanction you, we're going to hack into your own businesses, and maybe that's the way to get them to turn around their behavior. Maybe you have to beat them and threaten them. But actually, I think that's probably not right. Probably the way that we have to figure out ways to try to create win-win outcomes, and that's where the technological embrace comes from.
So do you see social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and the like, Google, corroding democracy, or do you see them as propagating the faith?
I think they're corroding democracy overall right now. I think that the effect of Twitter on American democratic discourse has not been positive. And if you ask the question, why is democracy in decline, and authoritarianism is on the rise, I think it's partly the decline in democratic discourse. And when Twitter and Facebook were founded, again, I would have made the opposite argument. I would have said that they increase democracy, right? They allow people to communicate in ways they could never communicate. They allow people to talk with people in other countries in ways that should lead to more empathy. It allows, Google allows you to search for information on climate change. And once you search for information on climate change, how could you ever deny it happened? And what happened is that because of the structure of the algorithms, because of the way the networks were built, they pushed us in directions that led us into filter bubbles, that led to outrage amplifications, and that crushed the media. And so all of those factors put together have put a real strain on democracy. Now, I do think that can be fixed. And I think one of the great civic challenges for America is to fix the technology platforms. And that's on us and that's on them, so that you can get to a point where the technology enhances discourse as opposed to degrading it.
Now, you see China long-term as a threat to the United States in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, what are they going to do with it all? They're going to. Putin said that the nation that controls technology, in effect, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's going to be the leader of the world.
I know he wasn't completely wrong on that. Well, I mean, thank goodness it's not Putin who's going to be the world leader in AI, because he'd be developing just systems to hack and disrupt us. I mean, the other thing to remember about China, one of the things that I've struggled with in the piece is that I don't like authoritarianism, and I don't like surveillance, and I don't like social credit systems.
No one does.
But they sure have made their country better off. And people in their country surely would choose their government over our government. So it's not like we're choosing our system over like the Venezuelan system, right? Or the Putin, where it's just awfulness all the way through, where what China has done has been beneficial in a lot of ways. So their rise is not as threatening as like if Mugabe were to become, a world leader.
If Mugabe would become a world leader. So I have a question for you, Nick Thompson.
A little bit of a straw man right there, but
all right.
Making a point.
Build him up and knock him down.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Nick Thompson.
Fire away.
And my question is, are we in a Cold War with China for our very existence over AI?
We are heading in that direction. We are not there yet, but that is the thing we most need to worry about and stave off. And the way to stave it off is either to be incredibly tough and get them to come to the table, or to be much more conciliatory and work with them.
Nicholas Thompson, A Gathering Storm. Thank you so much for
Thank you so much. That was lots of fun.
Lots of fun, and thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Take care, and all the best.